Persuadable. What's going on, boo-boos? So, this is me playing Luchino against 4 Wildlings. Now, in all fairness, I have no idea what the fuck these players are. This is a quick match. And before the match started, they were just like, every man for himself. So, I had a feeling that they were going to be trolling. Which, not in a toxic trolling way, but in a way where they just wanted to have fun. And I looked at it as, alright, all 4 of these players are competing against each other, so I'm just going to fucking destroy all of them, and then I'm going to pick one that I want to win. And I figured I would upload the footage. I want to be back on YouTube uploading footages every day. And sometimes that is going to require relaxed footage. And I thought that it was very, very coincidental to come across these 4 players who were having fun. And I thought it was a good match for me to kind of practice a little bit of my jumps and timing. And also maybe talk about something that's important, right? It's important for my YouTube to not only include funny stuff and skits or analysis, but also serious stuff once in a while. What I feel is serious on an educational stand front. It's one of the ways that I can justify doing this and acting completely outrageous. You know what's frustrating is when people say that they only want one side of you. And you come out with an important video, and then somebody will be like, well, you know, just come out with the funny stuff. Or you come out with an analysis video. Somebody says, you're taking the game too seriously. And I've learned that you can't really please everybody with your content. So the best way to be consistent is just to deliver the content and allow the people who wish to stay. And by all means, everybody who is watching right now, I want you to understand that your time is precious, and I value that, and I hope you do as well. One of the things that I figured I would talk about in this video while we're watching me have fun against these 4 Wildlings, which, by the way, I eventually decide just to let them bleed out. I get frustrated. I'm like, yo, fuck this, man. They're all trying to get me down and stun me. Well, can't stun me if I don't pick anyone up. One of the things that I wanted to talk about today is transgenderism. Well, actually, I don't like calling it transgenderism. In fact, you shouldn't either. But individuals who are transgender. And the question has come up as to whether these individuals have a mental disorder. And one of the things that I want to talk from a medical standpoint, also as a clinician, I know, I have to throw that in there so you don't think that I'm just at least completely unqualified, although qualifications are not always necessary for conversations, is that in order for something to be considered a mental disorder or a mental illness, there's diagnostic features to it. It doesn't mean that you stray away from what we would consider typical. I don't like using the word normal anymore. The word normal just has this idea that something, in order for it to function normally, must be consistent with what's typical. So I don't necessarily like the word normal, but people think that if you're not typical with the average sort of popular or generic version of who we are, individuals who are outside of the medical field have this tendency to label things as a mental illness or mental disorder. And from a clinical standpoint, what we know, and I'm speaking about this on the top of my head, you guys know I don't really plan my videos and I don't really take notes too much. How I would define a mental illness or a mental disorder using the American Psychiatry Association or the American Psychology Association, or the DSM-5, which is what we typically use for diagnostic criteria. A mental disorder or mental illness usually causes some sort of disability or distress. And it can affect your thinking and emotion and your behavior to the point where you no longer can function. And that's an important distinction. Your ability to function includes your things that we call activities of daily living, your ability to take care of yourself, or your instrumental activities of daily living, your ability to pay your bills or manage your medication or your ability to be a productive member of society. People think that for some reason, if you stray away from what we would consider typical, right, like heteronormativity or being heterosexual, that you automatically have a mental disorder or a mental illness, and that's actually not true at all. In fact, homosexuality was removed from the DSM in the 1970s. Actually, in my opinion, it got really removed in the late 1980s. They removed it and just called it something different. So in the 1980s, they removed homosexuality for a multitude of reasons. There's a lot of research and data you can read on this, but really what they realized is that being gay, which should not be confused with an individual who's transgender, however, because a lot of individuals who are part of the LGBTQ plus community have to join the same movement in order to gain traction, which is unfortunate, but it's the reality for advocacy. Sometimes comparing the two in terms of diagnostic features will show precedence in regards to how we define things. So anyways, homosexuality was removed in the 70s. It got called something else, and then it pretty much got removed in the 80s. Because clinicians realized that individuals who were gay could lead productive lives. In fact, a lot of them, or many of them, could be completely happy being able to love their significant other. I actually had it's a different story. And they realized, well, this isn't a mental illness then. This isn't a mental disorder. Plenty of gay people can function and be happy. A lot of the time they're dealing with social stigma, right? Like, for instance, I have ADHD. And although there's a little bit of social stigma, it's not on the same level. I don't have to worry about being persecuted from a church for it. And so what happens to me biologically makes me feel awful at times. I can't concentrate, can't do things. I have a mental illness. Being gay, there's no mental illness with that. That's just who the individual is, and they're perfectly capable of neither being distressing nor disabled. They can live productive lives and they can be happy. Often not. If they have issues with it, it's because of fear of the individuals around them or society and how they'll be interpreted. So how about we fast forward this to an individual who is transgender? An individual who is transgender, it does not have to be distressing or disabling. And in fact, they can live perfectly healthy lives. I remember I had a case study with somebody who was a captain. They were a captain of the airlines. They fly your airplane. They have had hundreds of thousands of lives, or if not at least tens of thousands of lives in their hands throughout their lives. And they were a transgender. And they were actually converting from a biological male, if you wanted to call it as such, because I don't like that term either, but from male to female. I don't even like using male to female because it makes it sound like that's a different story. Either way, for the sake of terms and for the sake of clarity, that they were transitioned into a female. And I remember I wrote a position paper when I was a freshman in college saying, I will never call a transgender individual their preferred pronoun. I was big on gay rights, big on gay rights. But I wasn't there yet for transgender rights. And it was through education and my college experience, working as a clinician. Actually, I wasn't even a clinician yet when I completely made a 180 flip. And I realized how uneducated I was. That's why typically when there's scandals with Identity V and homophobia and etc., racism, I usually say that education's the best way. I've been a big advocate of gay rights for a very, very long time. I mean, I was still in high school. People would try to say I was gay because I talk about gay rights all the time. And again, I don't always like comparing gay individuals with individuals who identify themselves as transgender. But for the sake of the video, I'm going to put them in the same category for the sake of clarity and using precedence of those diagnostic features. And what we know is that there is a diagnosis called gender dysphoria. In fact, the World Health Organization, American Psychology Association, etc., they don't really use gender identity disorder because your identity doesn't have to be a disorder. Your identity is your own. Gender dysphoria, which is in the DSM-5, which we use for all diagnostic features, it's how we diagnose people with mental illnesses. I don't. I'm an occupational therapist, but psychiatrists and MDs or medical professionals will. And we know gender dysphoria is actually not being transgender. If you read what gender dysphoria is, it's that internal conflict. It's the despair and those raunchy, uncertain feelings. And most of that has got to do with the fear of how society will treat you. So to make this clear, individuals who identify as transgender, they don't all have gender dysphoria. Some do. Many probably do, actually, back especially in the 70s and 80s. And maybe that attests to the fact that advocacy and gay rights movement has been doing a good job, and we need to keep pressing it forward. But gender dysphoria is that internal conflict in regards to how you feel society is going to treat you typically. But it's not only society. It's just that internal conflict, but it's often society. If everybody were to accept individuals who are transgender and there was no hatred or bigotry, right, in that ideal world, I'm not sure if we'll ever get there. If somebody was transgender, it wouldn't really be a big deal. And often that internal conflict most likely wouldn't be there. So that's why, from a medical standpoint, an individual who identifies as a transgender, they don't have a mental disorder or a mental illness. That science has evolved. And some people wish to live on old science, old logic, outdated reasoning that's not backed by science or numbers or rationale or reasoning. The idea that transgender individuals cannot be happy is suggesting that other historical inaccurate diagnoses misconstrued as mental disorders cannot be happy either. I mean, I wouldn't go so far. Actually, I would go so far as to suggest that I'm sure at some point, some scientists in some point of history probably thought that being attracted to a black person was a mental illness. Well, science has been wrong. Science is a process, and we strive to make it better. It's the same thing with COVID-19. There were many things, especially when the CDC said don't wear a mask in February. I told all my followers wear a mask. Here's the research. Here's the randomly controlled trials that not necessarily work towards COVID-19, but the rationale as to why I think my followers should wear a mask. The CDC and the Surgeon General changed their opinions later on in the month. Science is a process. We don't always get it right. But the worst thing that we can do is live on outdated old science. The idea that individuals who are transgender have a mental illness or have a problem. And what defines you as a person is not your stance right now, but what your stance is tomorrow and what your stance is the next day. You are fluid. You are dynamic. Open your perspective up, because outdated science, don't live by it. And sometimes that requires you to challenge yourself. Also, don't ask me why I let this motherfucker live. I don't know why. I just I just decided to let this person live. Thank you very much for watching my video. I do appreciate you. Thank you for watching my video. And hopefully I've been able to give perspective as to where the medical community is evolving towards. And although I can be quite outrageous and ludicrous with some of the stuff that I say in my videos, I hope that you continue joining my journey and learning with me. It's a beautiful adventure. And it's a boat big enough for both of us. Bye-bye now.